Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We find ourselves this morning contemplating a slightly different challenge to the ones we ordinarily set for ourselves. And I think the challenge is probably bigger for me than it is for you. I'm going to try and wind my neck in a bit, because it occurs to me as we look at this frankly surreal scenario with regard to the Brexit negotiations, where the two key negotiators are depicting almost entirely unrecognisable scenarios. It's almost as if one of them is saying the moon is made of cheese and the other one is saying, no, I think you'll find it's made of various different types of rocks and minerals. And I don't want to automatically presume that the bloke who has a track record of not really understanding the issues, or at least saying things that suggest he doesn't really understand the issues, or perhaps even deliberately misleads, is necessarily deliberately misleading again. I want to try to do this in a new way. Oh, it's Brexit, by the way. And I think what I'd like to do is invite you to call me, especially if you wouldn't ordinarily perhaps think that I would give you a fair hearing, or whatever sort of rationale or justification you have for not exposing your thoughts to the kind of scrutiny I employ, which is not necessarily a fair or brilliant scrutiny. It might be awful. I want some reasons to be cheerful now. There comes a point, I think, when you contemplate something that you fear is bad, where you would quite like to find nice, decent people who can perhaps persuade you that it isn't necessarily. I don't think I can say anything substantive about Brexit without veering into vaguely controversial territory. I don't necessarily think that's a criticism. I don't think you can either. I don't think anybody can anymore. I don't quite understand how that's happened. I do, as you know, worry that some of the beasts that we've unleashed as a nation over the course of the last 2 years will take a generation or two to get back into captivity, or to get a lid back on them. But what I mean when I say I don't think I can say anything without being controversial is that I tried, the morning after the result came in, you may remember, I tried to find things we could all agree on. And it was very, very hard. The only thing I suggested cautiously we could all agree on was that nobody knows what's going to happen next. But some people had a problem with that. People were still insisting that it's going to be very, very easy to negotiate, that it's, they need us more than we need them, and we'll be able to do deals left, right and centre. People didn't seem to understand the basic principles of membership. So even saying that nobody knows what's going to happen next proved controversial just over a year ago. I tweeted a year ago this week, believe it or not, that the next stage of Brexit latest, was people who realise increasingly that they've been lied to will start to blame the people who warned them rather than the people who did the lying. I still think that's true, but I want reasons to be cheerful. The 6-month mark, for me, was the point at which the debate seemed to shift on the Leave side from telling us things were going to be better to telling us and almost celebrating evidence that things weren't absolutely awful. So, a Japanese car company announces a bit of reinvestment in a country where they've already got factories, and that's held up as evidence of success, whereas, of course, it would have happened anyway, possibly even on a greater scale. So something shifted about 6 months ago. It's quite hard to pinpoint and track this in the British media, because 80% of it is still touting the line it touted in the run-up to the referendum. They're not going to turn around and say, actually, things have changed. But that to me was a substantive moment, when people stopped telling me things were actually going to be better than they were before, and started instead celebrating the fact that, look, here's some evidence that we're not actually all going to starve alone in a deep hole. That's not evidence of success. That's just mitigating failure. That's saying, look, things aren't quite as bad as they could be. Nissan's opening a factory, or Toyota's thrown a few quid in here, or Aston Martin are opening up there. That doesn't constitute success unless you can prove that it wouldn't have happened if we were still in the European Union. Do you see what I mean? So I want genuine reasons to be cheerful. 0345 6060 973. I reserve the right to, at least insist on evidence and truth, but I don't necessarily want to leave everybody who rings in with their sort of rose-tinted spectacles on. I genuinely don't want to leave you all bleeding on the floor today. All right, it's fun, and it goes nuts on the internet and all of that malarkey. But I don't know how constructive it is anymore, to be honest with you. I spent some time with one of my oldest and dearest friends earlier this summer, who is, without giving too much away, although regular listeners to the programme probably worked this out years ago, he is Eurosceptic royalty. He is from a family that is associated with Euroscepticism on a scale that I don't think any other surname in the country is, frankly, to be honest with you. I mean intelligent, sort of intellect-based, actually being elected to the House of Commons type of Euroscepticism, not the opposite of all those things. Unintelligent, dishonest, never elected to the House of Commons kind of Euroscepticism. And he was my last hope, I'll be honest with you. He's my eldest daughter's godfather, and we sat poolside in the south of France and discussed it for the first time. I hadn't seen him since the result dropped. We'd exchanged quite long letters, quite long notes. I told him my biggest fear was linked to a sort of emboldening of racist rhetoric. That was my biggest fear in the run-up, and he told me that he didn't think that was going to happen. And I said, well, I did, the work that I do, the job that I have exposes me to a section of British society that perhaps you rather luckily don't see. I don't think you do realise how deep some of these prejudices and bigotries go. And he conceded that had been wrong about that. He conceded actually before the vote had even been cast on the morning that Joe Cox was killed by a terrorist. And I said, yeah, you're probably right. There probably is stuff going on under the surface I'm not aware of. And when that poster came out, the Breaking Point poster, of course, which I think was on the same day, he said, no, I didn't think that my Britain would ever sort of go down that road. But he still felt that there was room for warmth and positivity. So we sat there in June in the south of France and had a chat about it. And he made me see things I hadn't seen before. He made me see things that explained why he believed what he believed. And it was quite an unpleasant conversation. It was beautifully well-mannered and friendly and warm. They love each other dearly. But it was unpleasant because he spoke in a kind of intellectual crucible and didn't quite grasp what the media here had done. Because what he described to me was plausible. What he described to me was a vote to leave the European Union, which would not have involved triggering Article 50 until we had some really good negotiators and some really good plans in place, until we had a really good roadmap of where we wanted to go. He's not a freedom of movement obsessive, and I kind of cautiously explained to him how freedom of movement had been turned into the biggest issue in the run-up to the election, to the referendum. Somewhat oddly, given that it was a refugee crisis from the Middle East that was used mostly to whip up fear of foreigners arriving in their droves and in their hordes. But the vision he had was quite nice, actually. But we both agreed in June that it was now an impossible vision to be realised. So while he still believes Britain will be better off outside the European Union, I don't think he believes it's going to be any time soon. Do you? 0345 6060 973. I'm not going to hit you either with catchphrases and glib little lines, but I do think it's important to remind ourselves that things are supposed to be better than they were. That was what was voted for by 52% of the electorate. The idea that things will actually be better than they were. And you look at these negotiations and you see people who made statements a year ago, or in the case of David Davis and Liam Fox, even more recently than that. And you just, I think some days, I do at least, I begin to wonder quite what's happened to sort of objective truth. This is David Davis in May 2016. The first calling point of the UK's negotiator immediately after Brexit will not be Brussels, it will be Berlin to strike a deal. This is the Secretary of State for Brexit not understanding the single most fundamental rule of European Union membership, which is that you can't negotiate. Berlin can't negotiate with Britain. Germany can't negotiate with Britain. They can only negotiate as a trading bloc. And, Mr. Juncker will be visiting Britain next week. This was in June 2016. Remember that this man who said that British deserters would face consequences. And now all of the complaining and arguing is about the fact that the European Union is obviously insisting upon defending its own interests. Here you go. This is in May of 2016 again. A UK-German deal would include free access for their cars and industrial goods in exchange for a deal on everything else. That's just pie-in-the-sky nonsense. So let's leave them out of it, in the sense of going over what they've said in the past with a fine-tooth comb, and just look instead at the future, the road ahead. I hope you can tell from my tone and my vocabulary and the sort of sense that I'm genuinely now looking for reasons to be perhaps cheerful's a little bit optimistic. What then? I'm going to go with cheerful. Genuine reasons to be cheerful. Evidence-based, not sort of abstract concepts like, I don't know, sovereignty and self-determination or whatever these increasingly meaningless phrases are this week, whatever the popular ones are this week. Which was just, look, things are going to be better than they were because... ... Yesterday on the programme, I genuinely didn't think anyone would ring me. I kind of got proved right. People did ring me, but when I was looking for answers to the question of what Theresa May passionately believes in, what Theresa May genuinely holds dear as a political principle from which she could never ever turn or which she would never ever surrender, I had a sneaking suspicion that we'd struggle to fill the page, and we did. We didn't really get anything written down. Lots of people rang me, but it was more to sort of dance around the conclusion that it's very hard to pinpoint any principles that she does consider to be bridges worth dying on. I don't think, I'm genuinely not doing that today. This isn't a sort of self-congratulatory exercise in rhetorical flourishes. There must still be a significant number of people who've got their eye on something that I can't see. And I speak for quite a lot of people. I think I speak for a growing number of people when I say that you never really meet fans of the European Union. I don't know anyone who would sort of be dancing in the streets in multicoloured clothes, cheering about the wonderfulness of the institution. You get it outside Britain, but I'm not that person. It's sclerotic. It's in some ways unwieldy. It's got all sorts of problems. But I don't yet see any evidence that I'm going to be better off out of it. And I'd really like you to give me those reasons to be cheerful. No fights. Let's not use the R word. Let's not talk about xenophobia. Let's just talk about reasons to be cheerful. Why you think your life's going to be better, or if we can't quite do that yet because there are so many variables in play, why you think our country is going to be better. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. I don't want to second guess the conversation, but I would cautiously suggest that the phones probably won't ring off the hook on this, partly because you know that on this programme you can't get away with sort of fatuous sound bites and dishonest catchphrases, but also because I read rapaciously across all of these issues, and if I was to put the hat on the other side of the argument and try to tell you what I think the reasons to be cheerful are, I would struggle. Which is not to say there aren't any reasons, it's just to say I don't think that there's going to be an avalanche of phone calls to the programme. I hope there is, because I would actually quite like to hit 11 o'clock feeling a little bit more upbeat about my nation's future than I do at the moment, because I love it. It's 10:16, where we launch a sincere and hopefully not forlorn attempt to map the things that are going to be better about Britain once the Brexit dust settles, the things that will allow a lot of people who listen to this programme to turn around and say to me, you see, mate, I told you not to be so downcast, you big Eeyore. I don't want to be Eeyore. I want to be Piglet. 03456060973. David's in Northampton. David, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. Yes, I'm cautiously optimistic.
That's a great phrase.
I feel that, I respect. There's, I voted to leave, but I hope things go well. I believe they can. Whether they will is another thing. But I see other countries in the world that trade and share with each other without paying annual tribute fees, without having erased borders, and without having a foreign court ruling on domestic non-trade issues. And I think we can do the same.
So, what countries are you looking at?
Every country apart from Norway and Iceland and Turkey that have special deals with the EU. All countries.
So we'll have less than them, will we?
Sorry?
We'll have less than them.
We're the sixth largest economy in the world. We'll trade.
I think we were the fourth when we voted.
Sorry?
I think we were the fourth when we voted. But no, I'm looking for the country, the model that you think we can emulate. Because you can say every country that's not Turkey. I presume you don't mean Ulaanbaatar or North Korea. So what sort of country? What trading model are you looking at first?
Okay, so we'll take any of the top 20 economies in the world, excluding Japan and Mexico, which have all got trade deals with each other via WTO or tariff-free. All countries in the world trade with each other via WTO tariffs or tariffs.
And how many of them do 44% of their trade with the European Union at the moment?
That's not relevant to whether we can have an arrangement with a country without giving foreign control over. We don't need that.
See, I did again.
Most of the other countries.
I just want you to name me the country and say we can be like them. Just one country.
It's one country. Okay. United States.
So we can be like the United States.
We can be like any of the countries in the world. About 178 countries in the world, James, trade with each other on WTO tariffs or a tariff-free arrangement. We don't need a foreign court, we don't need open borders, and we don't need an annual tribute fee paid to trade. It's not necessary.
Okay, that's good. We can be like America.
Or any of the 179 countries that I've mentioned.
Well, you haven't mentioned any. You've only mentioned America.
I mean, if you want me to go through a list, like, you know...
Well, I kind of do. I mean, we've got big... The differences between us and America are too long for me to list. I understand what you mean about foreign courts having legislation. How will our biggest trading partner, our biggest market, change then after we leave it?
Well,
and it does. Obviously, you're not going to explain to me how it changes in a good way, but you're going to tell me why. I want you to tell me why I shouldn't worry.
Okay, well, I believe it's all linked to the WTO, James, because the European Union and all members of the EU, including ourselves, are members of the WTO in their own right. So they can't block trade. They can't say, you can't sell us X, Y, Z. There are tariffs, but they can't block trade.
Does America pay tariffs to trade with Europe?
I believe so, yes. They have tariffs.
But you said we weren't going to, and then you said we're going to be like America.
No, I didn't, sir. No, I said we'd have WTO tariffs or a tariff-free arrangement. I didn't say...
Does America have a tariff-free arrangement?
They don't have a trade deal with the EU because they haven't managed it, because the EU only has trade deals with small...
Do they want a trade deal with the EU?
Andorra,
Canada.
And the entities like the Palestinian Authority. They haven't managed a trade deal with any notable economy.
Does America want a trade deal with the European Union?
Does America want a trade deal with the EU? Yes, I think they'd like to reduce tariffs where they can.
So they
have to speak with 27
Japan,
entities.
do they? What have they said recently?
Yes, the EU has finally managed to deal with Japan. Bravo to them. That's the only one of two countries the EU's managed to trade in the top 20.
That's all good. I'll take that to the bank. Thank you. That's I think you're probably a bit brighter than I am. Some of the things you've said I don't quite understand, but we'll be like America, but with... Oh, I can't quite get that. Just help me out one more time. We'll be like America, but...
Countries in the world.
I know, just slow down. Seriously, your brain's working too quickly for me.
Okay, do.
When we're like America, in what ways won't we be like America?
No, you're misframing the position, James. We'll be like most of the countries in the world that trade freely or on WTO tariffs. It's a very simple concept.
So how have we ended up being the sixth largest economy then?
That's a separate question to how we'll manage.
I know, that's why I'm asking you. I mean, if we're going to be better off, how high do you think we'll go?
Oh, the sky's the limit, James. You know, I believe in our country.
Higher than first? Higher than top?
What? I don't think there's a number less than one. It's an integer between 1 and 0, James.
Finally, something we can agree on. Jonathan's in Salisbury. Jonathan, cheer me up.
Good morning, James. James, one of the questions you asked in your prelim was, somebody phone in and give us some reason for hope.
Yes.
That was what you said, wasn't it?
Reasons to be cheerful.
Don't be cheerful, yes, that'd be good. Everybody's sitting around sort of trying to second guess whether we're going to do this and whether they're going to do that. But the fact is, at the end of the day, unfortunately, all comes down to money and power, whether we like it or not. I don't like it, but that's the way the world runs, and we all know it. And I think what we're seeing here is these talks are going to appear to be not going well at all until right towards the end, when the people with the real power and the money and things to lose and things to gain say to the negotiators, okay, we've had enough of this now, get it sorted, this is how it really is. I can give you a little tiny example, a microcosm of this negotiating procedure. I used to work for a company many years ago now, and I used to do claims. It was the construction industry, and I worked for about 6 months on a big claim, £750,000 against the main contractor. And I went in to see them at the end of all these months I've been working on it, and I didn't appear to get very far. And I came away and I told my boss how I got on. He then went to see the managing director of that company. Bearing in mind I'd put in a claim for $750,000, and he walked away and he walked back in the office and he smiled at me. He said, "Well done." He said, "They've just agreed to pay us $500,000.
We might be losing the room here, Jonathan. With the greatest of love and respect, we might be losing the room here.
Losing the room?
Yes.
In what sense losing the room?
Again, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about.
But I'm talking about watching these negotiations appear to be going not too well at the moment.
Yes.
But right at the end, before the due date, if you like, the people with the real money and the power, you know, Mercedes, Audi, BMW, lots of other people in Europe, will say, OK, this isn't going well. If you go on the way you're going, to their own people, the European negotiators,
yes,
we are going to lose billions of pounds or euros. They say, now, we're not having it. Now sort yourselves out and get in proper deals.
OK, so reason to be cheerful is that
I think so.
Big German companies will insist that the negotiators for the European Union do something differently from what they want to do.
Sensible instead of political, because there's money at stake, and it's the world.
You know they have spoken. The Confederation of German Automotive Industry has gone on the record several times on this issue.
Yes,
saying they're prepared to take a hit because the consistency of the single market is, in the long term, considerably more important than the short-term loss they might suffer if the deal is rubbish.
Yes, but we're getting pretty close to the cliff edge, and words are cheap, aren't they?
Well, it depends who's saying them, to be honest. If it's the Confederation of the German automotive industry describing the future of the German automotive industry, I love you like a brother, Jonathan, but I think those words they're not quite as cheap as Jonathan in Salisbury's analysis of the future of the German automotive industry.
Well, it's not just the car industry, is it? There's loads of other small companies, and they've all got a say. They've all got, you know, they'll be talking to their governments and saying, look, have a word with these guys, because this is going to cost us a fortune. We don't want this.
Right.
Compromise, for God's sake, you know.
Okay.
I think there's hope, James. I think there's hope. But I don't trust the European Union at all, I have to say.
Right.
Because they have.
Well, you have to trust them if you think they're going to buckle under pressure from all the little businesses in the German car companies.
No, because it's the greed and the power. I don't trust them, James, but unfortunately, in this case, I have to trust the greed and the power.
Right.
And that won't kick in till the last moment.
Okay, when's that going to be, do you think? Because, you know, it's March 2019 is the last moment, so what are we talking, February?
Yeah, that's right. You know, maybe 2 months before, something like that. Who knows? I mean, we're all guessing madly. But
I'm not. Okay. 29 minutes after 10. I've got phone lines free, so don't sit there moaning about the quality of the people getting put through. Ring me yourself and prove your genius. 0345 606 0973. Reasons to be cheerful. My life will be better because we can be like America and somehow not like America, or the German companies, they'll come to our rescue. The big German car companies will come to our rescue at the last possible minute, hopefully. 0345 606 0973. I don't enjoy this because this is my home. And it's the country in which I'm going to raise my children. It's the country in which my children are going to have to go to university because they're going to lose the freedom to go to university in 27 other countries. And I won't be able to afford to send them to university in America. I don't enjoy this because the quality of the education they're going to receive at British universities is going to be compromised by the fact that so many highly qualified academics aren't going to be there anymore. I don't enjoy this because they're spending £20,000 per appointment now in the NHS to bring in GPs from overseas, because people don't want to come here. I want you to help me out. I want you to tell me why things aren't as bad as some people tell me they are. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's how they look to me as well. 0345 606 0973. What is this wonderful, wonderful thing that so many of us just can't see? What is it? Where is it? Just point at it, or even just describe it. Just sort of grope around in the dark and tell me what it feels like. This thing that others can't see. What is it? Where is it? When is it? It's 10:31. I can't win, can I? 10:36 is the time. I'm trying not to be Mr. Mr. Scalpel today. Let people say a few things without necessarily pulling them all to pieces, and then you pull me to pieces for not doing it. I know that America has a variety of trade deals with a variety of different countries, and so to suggest that we can be like them without having any trade deals is palpably silly. But I almost want to borrow somebody else's Kool-Aid on days like today. You look at David Davis's track record of pronouncements on what would happen in the EU negotiations, and then you look at what is happening. You have two choices. You either find whatever potion it is that his admirers are drinking and ask for some, which is what I'm doing. Even that sounds unfair. It's not a potion. I'm sure some substantive, powerful, evidential stuff. Or you just sort of quietly despair And a lot of us are getting really bored of quietly despairing, or I suppose in my case, loudly despairing. So just show me what it is that everyone is missing, the things that will make our lives better, yours and mine, and our children's, actually and actively better. 0345 6060 973. I think it's a British disease, actually, probably led by newspapers during my adult life. In the way that I always read about the heyday of the Daily Mirror in almost incredulous terms. The Daily Mirror was the most popular newspaper in the country, and it was essentially dedicated to telling people how they could improve their lives, what they had to be grateful for, how they could empower themselves in the workplace. It was very closely allied to the trades union movement under an editor called Hugh Cudlip. It was a thing of beauty. And yet, for all of my adult life, it's been a giant in abeyance since Larry Lamb took over at The Sun. The most popular newspapers in this country have been dedicated to telling British people how awful everything is and why it's all the fault of foreigners. And I just don't like that. And I don't believe that that's the only rationale for that referendum result. Things that are going to get better. Where are we going next? Should we go to Barry in Hampstead? Barry, what's going to get better?
All right, listen, you are clearly the biggest Ramona on national radio. The history of the European Union and the single market is quite straightforward. We entered into the ERM back in the day as a vehicle to control inflation, to make tough monetary decisions on the basis of controlling our exchange rate. Yeah, in economics, that you can either control your exchange rate or your interest rate. You can't control both. It's the neoclassical dichotomy. We famously busted out of the RM back in the day because it was futile. Europe is such a big, diverse area where all the economies are so different, all the cultures are so different, economies work at different speeds. Despite the failure of the ERM, they decided to then push forward and have a single currency.
Barry, mate, let me speak. I will let you speak. I just want to remind you what question you're answering. What's going to get better?
I'm going to get there.
Well, I have a lot of people waiting, and you're kind of telling me stuff everybody listening knows.
Okay. All right. Bureaucrats and bureaucracy and people in the public sector add nothing to the economy. They are paid out of taxes which are collected from people in the private sector. So just the idea of getting rid of a whole layer of greedy bureaucrats is going to make us better off. If I was negotiating Brexit, I would just show them the middle finger, walk away, pay them nothing, and wait for them to come crawling back. And if that means we have a period where people have to buy domestically and not import and export so much, I'm not talking about autarky, tariffs are minimal in the grand scheme, that can only be better for the UK.
Okay. What was it you're going to show them?
What was it I was going to show them?
You said if I was in charge, I'd show them something. I missed it.
Middle finger.
The what?
I would just say, like, no, we're not paying you anything, we're gone, ta-da.
Okay, and if I was thinking of signing a trade deal with you, and I said, that last...
Listen, it's a two-way street, you
yes.
know.
Well, so's this conversation, hopefully, so now we'll go in this direction. If I'm thinking of signing a deal with you, and someone says, oh, he just showed his middle finger to the last people he signed a deal with and refused to meet his obligations, what would my attitude to you be?
What are the obligations they're pulling out of thin air?
The obligations that we've signed up for until 2019, until the next round of budget vote. No? Okay.
The next countries collectively.
All right, mate. Thanks for the finger. Very helpful. Reasons to be cheerful. Phone lines are open. Do not complain about the quality of people being put through. Just come and do a better job yourself. 034. I'm being uncharacteristically quiet today. But if the best you've got, I think we should show them our middle finger. Well, you'll forgive me for not exactly cracking open the Prosecco. Actually, I can't crack open the Prosecco, can I? Because we've shown them the middle finger. I'll have to crack open the £25 a bottle, but extremely good sparkling wine from Kent. Alan is in Belfast. Alan, what have you got?
Hey, James. Thanks for having me on. First-time caller, long-time listener.
You're very welcome.
I'm going to rain more on the parade. I get what you're trying to do and get the optimism of it, but yes. there is none. I think
there must be some. I don't like being put in a position where I have to malign people who've rung into the programme, but as Sarah's just tweeted to say, the people calling in today are parodies of leavers. I'm even wondering if they're actors. There have been no advantages of Brexit so far. There must be some, because decent people, I've got colleagues and friends who colleagues at least, but there must be some.
I'm an optimist, and there's a great level of optimism amongst the Leavers. But I think there's a difference between optimism and delusionality, whatever you want to go with that on.
Yeah,
but
well, just delusion, I think.
Delusion. we'll keep it simple. But that's where the issue is that there's a kind of arrogance and pomposity. Barry had a great example there. Give them the finger, wait until they come running back to us. What we're not getting here, again, the guy that was talking about getting trade deals like America, or actually kind of being in America. America's got what, about 1 billion people?
Yes.
Shy of 1 billion people. Britain has 60 million. So the EU trades on the basis that we've got 500 million people to offer to your country. Britain's going to be now going, we've got 60 million and we can't get access into Europe. There's a reason why all the countries, or all the big companies, are leaving Britain. There was a report out yesterday. I can send all the links to you guys afterwards. Britain's fallen in terms of FDI, which is one of the main things that was keeping the currency afloat as well. There was another report out last week that showed that there's been mass emigration already of European nationals, all highly skilled, as you've discussed on the show before as well. It's only going one way. Salaries are stagnant. Okay, manufacturing had a bit of a pickup a few months ago. Exports haven't really done all that brilliantly.
No, but exports are doing quite well, but 44% of our exports go to the European Union. So even when people tell me, look, exports are going well, they're going well because the pound has tanked. I'm going to fill my boots with British built goods at the moment because I get twice as much as I did last year, but most of it goes to the European Union, so you can't even use I don't think you can, but I want to be wrong because they say, look, exports are good, and really people I respect, like Dominic Lawson, write about it, and I think, well, he knows what he's talking about, doesn't he? And then someone else says, yeah, but look how much of that goes to the European Union, and we voted to close down that trading route, or at least to substantively transform it.
But this is the thing, and even with that, I don't think, for how much the pound has tanked, exports aren't exactly exceptional. You can actually see that the EU's exports have continued to rise into Britain as well.
I know that.
So it just doesn't make any sense. Anyone that's kind of sitting there going, oh yeah, we don't need the EU, and yeah, give them the two fingers, and what was it? They can go whistle and everything else as well. You look at it kind of going, this is something that you want.
Oh, come on, there must be something. Come on, Northern Ireland, for example, the border's going to be great.
Which one? There's so many different iterations of what it's going to be. I live in Belfast.
So what else? Let's be a little bit... Okay, I mean, it's fair enough that you've come on, even though you're not really helping me cheer up. You're being a sort of dose of salts, I suppose, or cold reality. What... We can't just keep calling all these people stupid and gullible and racist. They're not, a lot of them. So what can they see that we can't see?
To be honest, I've got some very intelligent mates, and...
Yeah.
Okay, I only found out afterwards, but they went and voted Brexit. But when you start getting into it, again, because like, we're going to do all these trade deals, but it's sound bites. It's actually like listening to Theresa May on a rerun. It's just soundbite after soundbite. And you're kind of going, you get that these things take decades to kind of tease out. They don't happen overnight. And you also get that the EU is going to continue to get trade deals when Britain leaves as well.
And then when they hear the Japanese Prime Minister say, well, all right, I suppose we can sign a memo with you, but our top priority is doing a trade deal with the European Union. How do they... Maybe it's just it's confirmation bias. Maybe if we were the other way around, we'd be as committed to the cause as they are. I'm trying to find ways to be nice.
Do you know what? I don't see the point in pandering to it. Like they ignored it all at the start. They're still ignoring it now. There's this, like I said, arrogance that the EU needs Britain.
But there's also an arrogance in calling everyone who disagrees with you gullible or stupid or racist, which is a path that Remainers have gone down.
I think, yeah, and it was you know what, it's kind of sad that the Remainers did go down. It's like, well, if you don't agree with it, you're stupid.
Yeah.
Which isn't right either, because everyone's entitled to their own opinion.
Up until the point that the evidence becomes incontrovertible, at which point, you know, if you're still arguing that the Earth is flat or that the sun revolves around the Earth, then I don't know what word is better than stupid, but it's going to be pretty similar, isn't it? It's going to be pretty close to a synonym.
I think anyone that I've spoken to, even friends that have said it, when you ask for anything substantive, there's nothing there. And again, it's the same with people.
I'm not there yet. I'm not as cynical as you. I might be the biggest Ramona on national radio from Middle Finger Man, but I'm not. I also largely because of the mate I told you about at the outset, who is, I'm not going to lie to you, he's the cleverest bloke I know. The cleverest bloke I know, and he comes from a long and proud line of Eurosceptic royalty. And I just, I'm not there yet. There must be something. What is it? Call me. Tell me. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. I'll stay with this for a little bit longer after the 11 o'clock, but there's some other stories in the news I'm keen to talk about. I've gone a whole week without indulging my newfound enthusiasm for nudity. What? Shut up. What I mean by that is that there is a story unfolding in Paris. A public park in Paris. That's Peter Pepper picked a pickled pepper. A public park in Paris is to open a nudist section, which really plays into the heart of something I've been thinking about since my holiday in Greece last month. September today, pinch punch, public park in Paris. And we ended up on a nudist beach by accident. I'm going to have to take advisement and possibly check with my wife before I decide how much information to share with you about that rather interesting interlude on our holiday, unexpected interlude. But I've really been wondering about a British attitude to nudity. I've got a Polish friend working with me today, and she says Polish people are the same, and a Welsh woman, but you don't count. Because I said in other countries in Europe, nudity is not treated in the same way. It's not this really weird, po-faced. Trying to work out why the British attitude to nudity is so different from the rest of Europe. But apparently in Poland, they're possibly even more buttoned up, both literally and metaphorically, than we are. So we can do it from a variety of angles. But the idea, imagine if I said to you today, Sadiq Khan has announced that a corner of Regent's Park is going to be dedicated to nudists. It's never going to happen, is it? Boris Johnson announced that a corner of Green Park is going to be dedicated to nudists. Just the idea of that happening in our capital city is palpably absurd. And yet in Paris, which is geographically speaking the nearest capital city to London, it's happening. What is it about our attitude? And I'd also like sex. It's not sex. That's part of my answer to the question, actually. We automatically, it's the same reason why breastfeeding debates in this country are so bizarre. We automatically presume that exposed flesh is somehow sexualized. But I'm also going to talk about drugs. That's why I mentioned sex. The only thing that's missing from the programme is rock and roll. Because with drugs, looking at this spice epidemic and a court case yesterday that has thrown yet another spanner in the works of criminalisation, I don't know if I've ever asked this question before, but if we could start from scratch, what criteria would you introduce for determining which intoxicants should be illegal and which intoxicants should not? Because this spice stuff looks rank, absolutely rank. And yet, if you were to list all the things that render it rank, there'd be some stuff you can buy over the counter or in your off licence that would probably tick some of the same boxes. So we'll get onto that later as well. I'm going to need a little bit of guidance. Now, what's going to be better post-Brexit about Britain? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And of course, not just the what, but as ever on this programme, also the why. Steve's in Ashford. Steve, what have you got?
Hello there, James. You've thrown me with the nudity in Paris. That's done me, that has. I think the thing that could be better, if the people in power had the right sort of mindset to put it into place, would be the fact that we can actually start training their own people again. I think that one of the main challenges is we're too obsessed with importing brain power, nurses, doctors, engineers, farm labourers. And there's a massive mindset that says we haven't got the people to do these jobs, we must bring them in.
Well, we have got the people, it's just we haven't got the people who want to do them. And of course, the great advantage of importing them is that we don't pay for their training.
I think we have got the people who want to do it, but I think the people who want to do it don't, for example, on the NHS sort of side of things, don't know a great deal about it. My brother was a manager in the NHS, but I don't know a great deal about it. But I think the challenge is that people are being lumbered with so much debt. Years ago, every major hospital used to have blocks of flats next to it, full of nurses in training, doctors in training. They've all gone. They've all been sold off, and now we import everything.
But why do we have to leave the European Union to build nursing houses for nurses?
So I think the mindset's changed. As opposed to buying a training their own and accepting the cost, somebody at one point in time decided that we'll save loads of money by scrapping that and importing them.
But why do we have to leave the European... I mean, do you know how much money the NHS England is spending next year on recruiting GPs from overseas? It just got announced this morning.
I imagine it's fortunes.
Go on, have a guess.
I bet it's hundreds of millions.
No, it's not all bad. It's only 100 million. And do you know how it works? Do you know how the money works?
No.
20 grand goes per appointment to an agency that finds them. So you find me a GP, I'll give you 20 grand to get them to move here. So the money's there, mate. They'd just rather give it to a recruitment agency that's owned by shareholders who probably donate to the Conservative Party than build houses with it. So I'll ask you again, how is leaving the European Union going to make more British people who don't currently want to be doctors or nurses become doctors or nurses?
See, I think they would want to become doctors and nurses if it was easier for them. If there weren't numbers so much debt. I think the lower echelon sort of. I've been self-employed for years and years and years, and now I've just had to start working as sort of a supplement business.
Yeah.
So I've just got off night shift. That's both me attached. But I see, like,
of course.
For example, my family's from Leicester, but my parents live in Cornwall. I spent a little bit of time working on the fields down there. Really hard work, manual labour. You stand in line in the morning and you get tapped on the shoulder with a guy with a stick. And if you've got a job, you can stay. If not, you go home again. Really hard work. But there were set teams of guys, families, that have been doing it for years and years and years on our fields, and they're damn good money because they were good at it. All piece rate, work their arse off. Excuse me. But now, them guys want a dole. Because the farms...
you put me again, I don't want to... I appreciate you've just come off a night shift, but, you know, one of the things that's held up as evidence of this government being good at something is the very low unemployment figures. Percentage-wise...
I don't believe it. It's a lie.
Well, you see, then I can't really continue discussing intelligently with you, because if I...
It's a classic example. I work night shift for a major retailer, right?
Would you rather be picking cabbages?
No, I'd rather my business be doing better, but I can't find the staff. It's ironic, isn't it?
Well, it is if you're arguing against reducing the flow of talented people into this country. It's beyond ironic, my friend. It's tragic.
The major retailer I work for, right, has basically cut down. Everybody's on, well, most people are on full-time contracts. Now, everybody is on 20-hour contracts. All of a sudden, the major retailer doesn't pay tax on the employees because most of them employ the tax rate. And you deal with the workforce, which is great, but what you've created is a benefit-dependent workforce. So the numbers look great. Yeah, we've got loads of people off the list, but then people are doing sort of 2 or 3 jobs.
You're preaching to the choir on this one. I completely agree with you that the unemployment figures have been, in a sense, manipulated because it's not jobs that people want to do, and it's not jobs that offer security or anything similar. But what we haven't done, Steve, with respect, my friend, you haven't explained how any of these perceived problems, especially your inability to find good staff for your business, are going to be improved by closing the tap of what you described as talent or brains coming into this country from overseas. You want fewer brains in Britain, is what you're telling me?
I'd just like to see the right brains being trained. I think nowadays...
So when you go to the hospital, you're more interested in the geographical origin of the person who's treating you than their compassion or ability to treat you?
I don't care. I really don't care.
But you do.
Well, I do and I don't.
Well, you do, because you said you just want to see the right brains being trained. So you go to hospital, you care more about the geographical origin of the nurse or doctor looking after you than you do about their medical qualifications or their ability to care for you.
What I mean, maybe I'm not explaining it quite. What I mean is, I'd like the clever people in this country to go to university and learn what they've got to learn for free, and be able to take on the sort of...
So would I. Free tuition. I mean, the problem is, of course, and I think I'll allow myself this, is that if you break down how people voted in the referendum according to who went to university, which by Steve's own measure is a mark of high intelligence, then I think we wouldn't have left in a month of Sundays. But you know, if you think that somehow leaving the European Union is going to free up enough money to abolish tuition fees and get rid of nursing bursaries, allow nurses to train at the taxpayers' expense, I'd love to see all of that happen. And this is possibly where some of Jeremy Corbyn's appeal kicks in, and possibly where his scepticism about the European Union was born. I don't know. A few more after this. I've been thinking a lot about astroturfing, a phrase I only really learned this week. I'd seen it knocking around. I wasn't quite sure what it meant, but we did an astonishing interview with a chap called Mike Hind earlier this week. You can find it on the website. And it was about the weird way in which social media has been populated and utterly corrupted by bots and sort of professional trolls who appear to act in the interest of Vladimir Putin's Russia. And the reason I've been thinking about it is because of some of the things Mike said about what astroturfing is designed to do. It's not just designed to undermine evidence-based journalism, that whole sort of hashtag fake news thing. It's also designed to change the very environment of debate. So, I mean, when I sit here and say I am trying to find positives about Britain's departure from the European Union, and I say I really want to avoid the ugly and unfair, no doubt, conclusion that everybody on the other side of the fence is either gullible, stupid, or racist. And then you find yourself reading the tweets and the texts that come in, saying, oh, James is calling everyone gullible, stupid, or racist again, when you're actually doing the exact opposite. I think we all need to start ignoring those people. And instead of complaining about the quality of the calls coming in and claiming that people are cherry-picked and we deliberately choose people, which is deeply offensive to the people who've got on, who no doubt didn't think that they'd done as badly as you think, as a Brexiter who can see brilliant arguments that none of my callers can make. Just call in yourself. Otherwise, you're just a coward. So I'm not calling you gullible, stupid, or racist. I'm just calling you cowardly. It shouldn't be that hard if it's such a brilliant thing. It shouldn't be that hard to point at a few things that are going to materially improve our lives. Materially, being both a kind of financial and a quality of life description. I really want them. That's another problem with being on an essentially liberal worldview, is that you want things to be good. Someone tweeted me this morning and said, honest question, genuine question, will you be gutted if Brexit turns out to be brilliant? So I replied and said, genuine answer, don't be bloody stupid. I am a father. The idea that I would want my children's life to be damaged, or worse than it needs to be, to win a political argument, is about as close to bonkers as I'm capable of conceiving. You know, the polling that showed 1 in 5 Remain voters want economic disaster in order to sort of win I told you so rights. Those people are as despicable to me, or almost as despicable to me, as the Leave voters who said they'd be comfortable seeing a family member lose their job because of Brexit. And they're the people who don't ever ring me to tell me what it is they're going to get instead, what it is that's going to be replaced. You know, the fishing waters arguments have been completely dismantled. Completely dismantled. What are the other ones? The border argument, we know isn't true. We know that we've had the powers all along. You read Guy Verhofstadt in the Telegraph today, and he explains that we're perceived as having had the best deal all along. We weren't in the single market, and yet we were the banker for the Eurozone. Just think about that for a minute. We weren't, not the single market, the single currency, forgive me. We weren't in the single currency, and yet we were essentially a major clearing bank for the Eurozone. So we get to make all that money out of the single currency without actually joining it. We weren't in Schengen. We had an opt-out on Schengen, which, you know, a lot of people aren't nearly as spooked by as a lot of the Leave camp are, but let's say you are spooked by it. We're not in Schengen. We had, under European Union law, the right to say to people, if you haven't found a job after 3 months, then you should probably go back to your country of origin. All of these things are just facts. And yet, still, I sit here as a disciple of evidence, and I can't see what it is that some really clever people can apparently see but not share. Now we're even moving into the realms where people are expressing surprise that the European Union is acting in the interest of the European Union members, that Barnier is putting his members first and not us. And then the people who've told us the European Union was rubbish all along are now complaining that the European Union is doing a really good job of looking after its members, when a year ago they were telling us that the European Union is rubbish to its members. It's just constant. It's never ending. But I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to do that. Well, I mean, I can only work with what you give me. But I'm not going to presume that the racist, stupid, gullible, angry people speak for everyone. If you aren't going to ring me yourself, then you'll just have to listen. Because I'm not going to let the Leave at all costs. I'm not going to let the kind of dopey, xenophobic obsessives speak for everybody on the other side of the argument. It's not fair. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you call if you can provide intelligence, evidence-based, or even, let's just say, evidence-suggested optimism of how, I may be selfish about it, how's my life going to get better? 0345 6060 973. And if you don't want to be part of my own personal psychodrama, how is your life going to get better? How is your life going to get better? The last lad, lovely bloke, Just come off a night shift. He's had to go back into employment because his own business wasn't washing its face properly. Why wasn't his own business washing its face properly? Because he couldn't find the staff. What's he looking forward to? Closing down immigration, bringing in fewer people. You can't find the staff and you want fewer people to choose from. Again, you know, what is it that I'm missing when I hear stuff like that? Adrian's in Westcliff-on-Sea. Adrian, what have you got?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Well, reasons to be cheerful for where we're at.
Yes. Or where we're going. Where we're going, I think, more pertinently.
Yeah, exactly, that's true. Where we're going and where we're at the moment. So I'm looking forward to the political fight back, which clearly starts about now. And we'll get back into the EU a bit stronger.
No, I'm not having this. No, you can't. No, I'm looking for reasons to be cheerful for leaving. But here's a reason to be cheerful. It's soon going to be clear that it's so rubbish we'll have to get back in again.
Yeah, that's the reason to be cheerful, James.
I don't think it will happen. You don't I mean, I don't think it will happen for the reasons that I just alluded to. It won't happen because there is no evidence, really, that people are responding to evidence. People are still married to whatever it is that you and me can't see.
If we look at the long game, which unfortunately we are looking at, we have to say, well, you know, this is not acceptable, and the reasons are this, that, and t'other.
There's too much invested. There's too much invested, Adrian. There's too much pride involved. I mean, not just from the media, but from some of the key players as well. You just make these predictions, and you say, look, give it a month, and they'll be blaming it all on Remainers. Give it 2 months, they'll be blaming it all on the European Union. They are never, ever, 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 ever going to turn around and say, my bad. And until they say, my bad, the disciples will continue to follow.
Yeah, but we've got to fight back, just like in any good fight. You know, you can do it politically, you can do it at ground roots level. You start with the education of why something might be failing.
How can you fight back? Okay, here's what I do. Here's what I've been doing for 18 months, okay? Someone will ring me, they'll give me a long list of things they believe to be true. I'll provide them with incontrovertible evidence that none of these things are true, and they'll go away even more convinced that they're right and that there's something wrong with me. And they'll go away even more angry and frightened than they were when they rang in. It's like a monster under the bed. You show your children that there's nothing under the bed. You get your torch, you shine it under the bed. There's no monster. Your children love you. They give you a kiss. They fall asleep. You take a Brexit voter, you shine the torch under the bed, you show them there's no monster, and they want to punch you in the face.
Yeah, don't give them a torch, mate.
I demand my monster. Jack's in Chigwell. Jack, what have we got?
Hello, mate. Well, I don't know who you two think you're fighting, but for me, I think we're in this together. But
that's the point I'm trying to make, is that if we're looking to pull together...
Nobody seems to have any balance on this, you know. All we hear from is people who are extreme leavers, people who are extreme remainers, people who are so angry at having to leave because they don't want to, and people that are so angry that we haven't left yet because we made the decision.
No, I don't recognise that. I don't recognise that. This is what you hear from me is not anger. What you hear from me is confusion and a degree of despair, and what I'm looking for...
But you've got a way of articulating yourself, which is very good. Not everyone can do that.
Yeah, but again, you can't do that. It's not a way of articulating myself. I present you with facts, and you can't say, oh yeah, but they're not proper facts because you're just really good at arguing.
But that's not the reason why I phoned up.
Good.
I wanted to try and give you something maybe to latch onto.
Good, go on.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Now, at the moment, we've got a situation where we've got people leaving the country, not as a direct result because of Brexit, but because the money that they're sending home to the places where they originally came from doesn't have the same value anymore because the pound's dropped. So what's happening now is they can work here.
That's not. I mean, again, I have to present you with facts, or I have to ask you to provide me with the facts of what percentage of income paid to EU nationals do you think is, quotes, sent home, end quotes.
I can't do that, James.
Well, you have to, mate. Otherwise, you have to, because I off the top of my head, I think it's less than 4.
Okay, then I accept what you're saying.
But you don't, do you?
No, it's what I think is going on from the people that I have spoken to. They've said to me, you know what, I don't want to work here because I can actually earn the same money at home virtually. But that's neither here nor there.
No, but that's different to what you said as well.
The other side of the coin is we've got a drop in the pound, which means we've got foreign investment at the moment. This is our only opportunity right now to actually put some building blocks in place so when the pound begins to rise again and that investment's withdrawn. So I do think that one of the advantages to this is we now have to train our people properly.
Why do people keep saying this to me? We have to train our people properly. What people?
Right, the people who want to do the jobs that are available in this country, we need to open their eyes to the fact that there are
sort of jobs? What sort of jobs are you talking about?
every job, from a dustman to a doctor. I think people need opportunity to. I mean,
so what stops them from being dustmen now?
I think apathy, laziness.
So we're going to go back once we leave. We're going to go back to maligning the poorly paid and the unemployed. Well, you kind of are. You're describing an imaginary army of people that are too lazy to be dustmen.
Oh, James, how can I explain this to you in the only way I know?
Why don't I shut up for a minute? We'll go to we'll take some adverts. We'll come back and I won't interrupt you for a couple of minutes.
You want to come back to me?
Yeah, of course I do, Jack. All right.
Okay.
Stay there. Nudity and drugs on the way, I promise you. I don't know how that's going to work on the radio, but you'll soon find out. Before that, a not entirely successful adventure this morning into finding reasons to be cheerful, avoiding... Because I think what I get upset by is what you sometimes get turned into by arguing. In that, you know, if you start arguing about Brexit and you come up against someone who's banging on about foreigners and borders and you get angry and you call each other names... We've been largely successful in avoiding that today. So when you remove all of the lazy, quasi-xenophobic rhetoric from the equation, what have we got to look forward to being out of the European Union? And I was badgering Jack a bit before that break, so I'm going to let him speak uninterrupted for a couple of minutes. Jack, fill your boots.
I'm just here to try and give you something positive to hang on to.
Bless you.
Something I've done as well as I wanted to, but let me give you a bit of a flavour, just for me. Right?
Yeah.
So, my family, on my dad's side, born in Italy, came to Scotland in the 50s and 60s. They moved to London, had me. My brother's a teacher in a European school in Europe. So I'm pretty much a mixed bag. But I'm an East End boy. I come from East London. I tell it like it is. And the truth is growing up, I was on the dole. It was a bad time in the late 70s, early 80s. And lots of people that I knew had jobs while they were working and on the dole at the same time. There's a lot of people who took advantage of this country. English people, British people, who didn't play the game. As a result of that, I think we've got a group of people that are a little bit uneducated, that have kind of let things go. And that's what I believe. And I believe that some of us who have maybe pushed on in life and done better than maybe we were expected to have done, can give things back to people by giving them jobs and stuff to work. But in my line of business, I can't find British people that want to do the jobs that are available, which comes back to what you've said about people from Europe coming and other places to do work that people here don't want to do. But we've also got an only way as Essex mentality where everyone wants stuff for free, everyone wants it handed on a plate, everyone wants to be rich before they've done any work for it.
Yes.
And you don't give me the impression of someone who recognises that, what I see.
How long have you listened to this programme for?
Oh, a long time, James.
Really? Well, you could have been quoting me then.
Me a moment ago. Now you're interrupting.
No, you're right. Shut up, O'Brien. Wind your neck in.
Just the last thing, then I'll let you kill me dead.
Oh, well.
Right? The thing is that I actually do believe in the people in this country. The foreigners are here and the Brits are here, everybody. I actually believe we've got masses going for us.
So do I.
We need to believe in us a bit more and we need to invest in the country a bit more. But there's only so much that you can do with what you've got.
I haven't heard. No, I'm going to have a little... I'm going to ask you one more question.
Buy British.
Well, no...
People, whatever colour we are, we'll get through this.
Did you see that German supermarket that removed all foreign goods from its shelves last week? Did you see it on the news?
No.
You probably should have a look at that. But I'm I mean, there's no reason why we can't suddenly... Or not even suddenly, why we can't start manufacturing a lot more with a reduced workforce. But what part does leaving the European Union play in the future you've just described to me? Because I don't see how any of that is rendered easier or harder by being in or out. In fact, I'd probably say it's easier in to do all the things you've described because we've got this wonderful single market on our doorstep to sell stuff to.
You know what the problem is, James?
Go on.
And we've been fed a dud by everyone, and the fault lies with David Cameron when he went away before the vote to leave and said he was going to go and get this and get that, and they sent him away with a flea in his ear. Many people in this country actually felt embarrassed by the way he was treated. And that's actually, I think, caused a lot of people...
Yeah, you might be right. You might be right.
Take that. Why should we take that? And they've sent our David Cameron away with a flea in his ear.
Well, they sent him away with a fairly stark message that you've already got the best deal of any country in the European Union. You're not in the single currency, but you get to profit from banking it in London. You're not in Schengen, but you get to benefit from all the freedom of movement that bring economic improvements to the rest of the single market. You can control your borders. You've just successive governments, Labour and Conservative, have chosen not to. I don't know what he thought they could give him that he didn't already have the power to do, Jack. But you're right. By the time it reached the British public, it looked like they'd given him. They'd thumbed. What is it? Do you bite your tooth? What did it bite your thumb? It looked like they'd bitten their thumb at him, didn't it?
Yeah, they embarrassed us.
Well, they kind of did, but it depends. It depends what end of the telescope you're looking from. And you're right. It's his fault. He hasn't put his head out in public, has he yet? But the idea that that's the question I'd love to ask him. What did you think was going to happen? But I guess we all view the European Union through a 30-year thick lens of Boris Johnson-flavoured reporting. You know, that man's career started when he was the Daily Telegraph's Brussels correspondent and saw the astonishing response on the letters pages when he started lobbing untruths and half-truths from Brussels back to Blighty. That is how his career started. Actually, that's not true. It's how his career restarted after he'd been fired from the Times trainee scheme for making up a quote from his own godfather. But hey, what's not to trust? Jack, mind how you go. John is in Streatham. John, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for letting me dial in.
Well, you can always dial in. It's getting on. You're thanking me for.
Getting on. Yeah, normally engaged. I just wanted to try and bring some of my rationale for voting Leave last June, and it's around some of the proposals, for example, the EU is doing around railways. So we know in the UK that people are generally in favour of nationalisation. We saw a lot of that recently, and it was in the Labour manifesto, railway nationalisation. And one of the EU proposed legislation that's been adopted at the first reading is the fourth railway package, and part 3 of this is to open domestic passenger markets to new entrants and services from December 2019. And what the EU is saying is that competitive tendering for public rail service contracts in the EU will be mandatory. And what this means as an implication is that it's going to be very, very difficult for state-owned monopolies like Deutsche Bahn or SNCF to actually bid and win those contracts across all regions in their respective countries.
You're a Lexit, right?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Your Lexit. This was the initial proposal for rail infrastructure and services to be split into separate organisations so that you break up national operators.
That was abandoned, right, by in the initial...
After Angela Merkel directly intervened.
Yeah.
It would only have been relevant in this country to Northern Ireland anyway, because our infrastructure is already state-owned by Network Rail.
Oh, agreed. But the infrastructure is a separate point. This is about the rail services. So running the trains, which is what we have in the UK. And that is the component that will need to be put out to competitive fair tendering for public rail service contracts. I agree, the tracks will be still state-owned. That's fine. And I know that Angela Merkel did directly intervene to stop that being... So
you want to get out so that we can renationalise the rail services?
No, so that's the kind of secondary point, I guess. Yeah. The main point for me is that as a voter, my kind of almost question to Remainers out there is, how, if this proposal goes through, and presuming it's gone through the first reading, presuming it goes through, how do I, as a voter, get the EU to withdraw this piece of legislation from its book? I can't. If I lobby my MEP, they don't have the ability to remove legislation. They can ask the Commission if they will do it, but they can't force them. I can ask my MP, can you pull it out of the UK through the UK Parliament? They can't really do that unless they want to be sued by the ECJ for not complying. So I think that's for me, and I get that.
No, I like it. That's my best. How long are we? It's taken an hour and a half, but you're the winner.
Oh, fantastic!
No, you really are, because I think that railways should probably be in state hands. The weird bit of what you're describing is that the UK is currently, I think, the only European Union member where all rail services are essentially privatised. So I need to swat up on why the European Union is doing something that will turn services that currently have an average fare of about 30 quid for a journey that in Britain would cost closer to 70.
Yeah, I don't know the motives. I think it's to do with harmonisation across the EU, and there's other parts around standardisation of tracks and stuff. But I think I get I'm a Leave voter, and I know there's a lot of anger towards us right now, and I know that also I'm not deluded enough to think leaving the EU is going to be a ball ache. It's very, very tough, very difficult. It's going to cost us economically. There's not going to be magic money falling out of the sky. But for me, and the principle I voted on was that, long term, if these sort of regulations come through, and so far you always ask the question, what rules don't you like? People don't know it because there aren't many. Let's be honest, they're probably quite useful.
Yes.
But if this stuff, this is an example of one which I don't like. What if there's more? Where do I influence it? And that's my real gut problem with it, really.
And that speaks of two truths. The first is open to challenge. I've just looked up what Fact Check had to say about the EU regulations proposal, and as far as renationalisation is concerned, the reality is that unless the rules are interpreted in an extreme way, they do not make it any easier or more difficult than the structure in place at the moment. But you are, of course, free to interpret the rules in an extreme way. And the second thing you've highlighted is the abject lack of faith that anybody has, whether they leave or remain, in the kind of democratic delivery of the European Parliament, because again this 30-year thick lens of Boris Johnson flavoured reportage has blinded us to the fact, I believe now, I didn't at the time, I've had a crash course in it, that we could actually have elected really good people to go to the European Parliament. We could have done what other countries do and almost treat it like a second chamber, like the House of Lords is treated in this country. Send the experts there, send the people with lifelong careers, and we didn't. So we sit there thinking that we've got no voice, because the only voices we ever hear coming out of Brussels with an English accent are essentially racist liars.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think as well, to your point, is if say the European structures were more like, say, the UK and other other like the US structures, where the chamber that proposes legislation is the directly elected bunch of MPs, and the revising chamber was the kind of experts.
Exactly.
It was a bit of a flip round. That would, for me, I'd feel so much more comfortable, but there were no signs that was going to change, and it was a horrible decision to make. I wish I hadn't had to vote, to be honest. But
yeah, so do I. Well, so did Richard Dawkins. It was when Richard Dawkins said he wasn't clever enough to vote in the referendum that I began to think perhaps we were all looking at it from the wrong end. So are you an admirer of Jeremy Corbyn? You don't have to answer that.
I admire him, but I'm not. I didn't vote for him personally, but yeah, I admire parts of his policy.
Because that's the thing I need to swat up on is that sort of Bennite and the nationalisation side of getting out. I know that Mick Cash subscribes to a similar school of thought, but again, I'd refer you to that. It's a website called The Conversation. It bills itself as academic rigour for journalists. It won't be infallible, but it's very, very interesting to read up when they do a fact check on claims like the one from the General Secretary of the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers, the RMT. Food for thought, thank you. And we got there in the end. So if you're in favour of a renationalised railway, then getting out of the European Union, oddly, would be a good thing to do, despite the fact that at the moment every other railway in the European Union is currently nationalised. Oh, I wish I could see it in such sort of black and white simplistic terms as everybody today, except perhaps John and me and Jack have managed to. It's 11:31.